Give a human seawater to drink, and you're not quenching thirst. You're accelerating dehydration, sometimes fatally. It's one of the most well-known survival rules on the planet, drilled into anyone who's ever taken a wilderness safety course or watched a survival documentary. Never drink salt water. Your kidneys can't process it, and drinking it will kill you faster than not drinking anything at all. And yet, in deserts across the Middle East and North Africa, camels regularly drink from brackish wells and salt-heavy water sources that would be genuinely dangerous for almost any other mammal. Water saltier than what most survival guides consider the absolute limit of safety. And they don't just survive it. They thrive on it, in conditions that would kill an unprepared human within days. This is the story of exactly how a camel's body manages to do something that seems to directly violate one of the most fundamental rules of mammalian physiology, and what happens inside that animal's kidneys, blood, and cells that makes the impossible not just possible, but almost routine. But to understand why salt water is so dangerous for humans in the first place, you first need to understand what your kidneys are actually doing every time you drink anything at all, because the danger of salt water was never really about the salt itself poisoning you directly. It's about a mathematical problem your kidneys can't solve. Human kidneys are remarkably effective organs, but they have a hard physical limit on how concentrated they can make urine. That limit exists because of the specific anatomy of the tiny filtering structures inside your kidneys, called nephrons, and the maximum concentration a healthy human kidney can achieve is roughly twice as salty as seawater itself, sitting at around 1,200 milliosmoles per liter compared to seawater's roughly 1,000. That sounds like it should be enough of a margin to work with. It isn't, and here's exactly why the math falls apart so quickly. To flush the excess salt your body absorbs from a liter of seawater, your kidneys need to produce urine that's more concentrated than the seawater you drank, since the kidney can only concentrate urine to about twice seawater's saltiness, but the body also needs additional water just to carry out that filtering process safely. Water your kidneys pull from your own tissues to dilute the process enough to function. The result is that for every liter of seawater a human drinks, the body ends up needing to excrete more water than that liter actually provided. A losing equation that drains your body's water reserves faster than the salt water replenished them. You end up more dehydrated after drinking it than you were before, and the excess sodium circulating in your bloodstream in the meantime creates its own separate cascade of problems, drawing water out of your cells to try to dilute the blood, the exact same dangerous mechanism behind severe salt poisoning. So how does a camel avoid this exact mathematical trap? The answer isn't a single trick. It's a coordinated set of adaptations working together across multiple organ systems, each one addressing a different piece of the same underlying problem. The first piece of the puzzle is the camel's kidneys themselves, and they are genuinely extraordinary organs. Research measuring camel kidney function has found that camels can concentrate their urine to levels dramatically higher than what human kidneys are capable of, with some studies recording urine concentrations roughly twice as concentrated as what a human kidney can achieve at its absolute maximum. Camel nephrons are structured differently, with notably longer loops of Henle, the specific looping structure inside a nephron, responsible for the actual concentrating process, allowing far more efficient water reabsorption before urine is finally excreted. Where a human kidney hits a hard physiological ceiling that makes seawater a losing proposition, a camel's kidney has a substantially higher ceiling, one that shifts the entire math of processing salt water from a losing equation into a survivable one. But kidney efficiency alone doesn't fully explain it, because even an extremely efficient kidney still needs a body that can tolerate significant fluctuation in blood salt concentration while that filtering process is happening. And this is where camel blood chemistry becomes genuinely unusual. Camel red blood cells are shaped differently than almost any other mammals, oval rather than the disc shape found in humans and most other animals. Researchers have found this shape allows camel blood cells to continue flowing smoothly, even when blood volume drops and blood becomes significantly more viscous during dehydration or high salt intake, conditions under which human blood cells would begin clumping and severely restricting circulation. This oval shape also allows the cells to swell considerably, absorbing extra water when the camel finally does drink, without rupturing, something human red blood cells are far more vulnerable to under similar extreme osmotic stress. There's a third adaptation that's arguably the most surprising of all. and it involves something most people would never think to connect to drinking salt water at all: the camel's famous hump. Contrary to popular belief, a camel's hump doesn't store water directly, it stores fat. But that fat storage plays an indirect but critical role in the animal's overall water economy. By concentrating the camel's fat reserves into a single hump rather than distributing fat as insulation across the entire body, the way most mammals do, camels avoid trapping heat across their whole body surface, allowing significantly more efficient heat dissipation through the rest of their skin. This matters enormously for water conservation, because a camel that isn't constantly fighting to cool an insulated body doesn't need to sweat nearly as much to regulate its temperature, directly reducing how much water the animal loses and needs to replace in the first place, which changes the entire calculation of how much margin the body has to work with when it does encounter salty water. Camels also tolerate a degree of internal body temperature fluctuation that would be dangerous in most mammals, allowing their core temperature to rise several degrees during the heat of the day rather than immediately triggering the kind of heavy sweating response most mammals rely on. This delays water loss until temperatures drop in the evening, when the stored heat can radiate away without the metabolic cost of evaporative cooling. Combined with kidneys that lose remarkably little water in the concentrating process, and a digestive system that extracts an unusually high percentage of moisture from food before waste is excreted, the camel's entire physiology is built around an integrated strategy of minimizing water loss from every possible angle, not just maximizing water intake efficiency. There's one more adaptation worth mentioning, smaller in scale than the kidney and blood cell mechanisms, but still part of the same overall strategy: the structure of the camel's nose itself. A camel's nasal passages are lined with intricate, convoluted structures that capture moisture from every exhaled breath before it escapes into the dry desert air, recycling water that most mammals simply lose with every breath out. It's a relatively small contribution compared to kidney efficiency or blood cell resilience, but it fits the same underlying pattern: a body engineered at nearly every point of potential water loss to reclaim rather than waste it, so that whatever water the animal does take in, salty or otherwise, goes considerably further than it would in almost any other mammal. It's important to be precise about what camels can actually tolerate, because the popular claim that camels can drink pure seawater indefinitely isn't quite accurate, and overstates the case beyond what the research actually supports. What camels reliably handle is brackish water, water with meaningfully elevated salt content, often several times saltier than typical fresh water sources, water that would cause serious problems for humans and most other livestock, but that falls short of full ocean-strength seawater. Studies on extreme salt tolerance in camels have found they can survive on water considerably saltier than most other domesticated animals can handle, a critical adaptation for desert and coastal arid regions where fresh water sources are scarce or unreliable. Even if true seawater at full ocean concentration still eventually pushes past what even a camel's remarkable physiology can indefinitely sustain. This distinction matters because it reveals something important about how these adaptations actually work. Camels aren't defying the same basic physiological math that makes seawater dangerous for humans. They're operating with a body that has shifted every variable in that equation dramatically in their favor: a kidney with a much higher concentrating ceiling, blood cells built to tolerate extreme osmotic stress without failing, and a whole-body water conservation strategy that minimizes how much of a burden any given intake of salty water actually places on the system. The fundamental rules of mammalian kidney physiology still apply to a camel exactly as they apply to a human. The camel has simply built a body with dramatically more margin within those same rules. This research has practical implications well beyond simple animal curiosity too. Scientists studying camel kidney function have looked closely at the specific genetic and cellular mechanisms behind their extreme urine concentrating ability, partly out of interest in what it might reveal about kidney disease and dehydration tolerance in humans, and partly because understanding extreme osmotic stress tolerance in camel red blood cells has informed broader research into blood storage and transfusion science, where similar challenges around cell stability under osmotic stress are a persistent, practical medical problem. So why doesn't this story get the attention it deserves, given how directly it seems to break one of the most repeated survival rules people know? Partly because the popular version of the claim that camels simply drink seawater like fresh water with no consequence is a simplification that skips past just how much specialized physiology is actually doing the work behind the scenes, and partly because the real explanation, kidney nephron structure, red blood cell shape, fat distribution, and temperature regulation all working in coordinated concert, is simply more complicated than the single dramatic image of an animal casually drinking from a salty well. This doesn't mean the rule about avoiding salt water applies any less to humans, or that any of these specific adaptations could ever translate into a human body handling seawater safely. Human kidneys, human blood cells, and human temperature regulation remain built for an entirely different set of constraints, and nothing about camel physiology changes that underlying math for us. What it does show is that the line between a fatal decision and a survivable one isn't fixed across every mammal the same way. It shifts dramatically, depending on the specific architecture a given species has spent millions of years refining, and in the case of the camel, that architecture has been tuned, organ by organ, specifically for a world where the water available to drink is rarely as clean or as fresh as any other mammal would need it to be. The next time you picture a camel walking through the desert toward a brackish, salt-crusted well, remember what's actually happening beneath that calm exterior. Kidneys operating at a concentrating capacity, nearly double what your own body could manage. Oval blood cells built to bend rather than break under conditions that would seize up human circulation, and a whole-body strategy engineered, quite literally from the hump down, around surviving in a world where salt water isn't a death sentence, but simply another resource to be carefully, precisely metabolized.